Dad, are you okay? You look like you're about to pass out.
Nathan Cole did not hear his daughter's voice at first, because his entire world had narrowed down to the glowing screen of his phone and the three simple words that had just destroyed his life. The text message sat there innocent and devastating, the little delivered notification mocking him from beneath the words he had typed just seconds ago. She is gorgeous. I cannot stop thinking about her smile. That red dress. I have not felt this way in years. The message was meant for Derek, his best friend since college, the one person he could confide in about the unexpected feelings that had blindsided him at last night's parent-teacher conference. Derek would have laughed, made some joke about Nathan finally rejoining the land of the living, and then offered to wingman him into asking out Sophie's English teacher. But Nathan had not sent the message to Derek. He had sent it to Victoria Hayes, his direct supervisor at Hayes and Crawford Accounting Partners, where he had worked for the past 8 years, building his career from junior accountant to the edge of a senior position. The same Victoria Hayes who was known throughout the firm as the Ice Queen, a woman so committed to professional boundaries that she had once reprimanded an employee for discussing their weekend plans in the break room. The same Victoria Hayes who held Nathan's upcoming promotion review in her perfectly manicured hands. The read receipt appeared beneath his message, and Nathan felt his stomach drop through the floor. Dad, seriously, you are scaring me. Nathan finally looked up from his phone to see his 12-year-old daughter standing in the doorway of their small but tidy kitchen, her backpack slung over one shoulder, and her dark hair pulled back in the ponytail he had learned to do from YouTube videos at 2 a.m. 4 years ago. Sophie's face was creased with concern, her eyes searching his face with that perceptive intensity she had developed since her mother walked out and left them both to figure out life on their own. "I am fine, sweetheart," Nathan managed, forcing his lips into something he hoped resembled a smile. "Just a little work thing. Nothing to worry about." Sophie did not look convinced, but then again, Sophie was never easy to fool. She had had to grow up faster than most kids her age, learning to read his moods and navigate around his bad days with a maturity that sometimes made Nathan's heart ache with pride and guilt in equal measure. "You sure? Because you are kind of pale, and you are doing that thing where you grip your phone like it personally offended you." Nathan glanced down at his white-knuckled fingers wrapped around the device and consciously loosened his hold. Just sent a text to the wrong person. He admitted running his free hand through his disheveled brown hair in a gesture of frustration he had never been able to break. "Nothing life-threatening, I promise." Was it about me? The worry in Sophie's voice cut through Nathan's spiral of panic, and he immediately set aside his own crisis to focus on his daughter. "No, honey, absolutely not. Nothing about you, I swear." Sophie's shoulders relaxed slightly, and Nathan felt another pang of guilt that his 12-year-old's first instinct was to assume she might be the subject of something embarrassing or problematic. 4 years of being raised by a single father who was clearly just making it up as he went along had left its mark on her, even if that mark was hidden beneath her confident exterior. Good Sophie said, adjusting her backpack straps with a decisive nod. "Because I do not need you embarrassing me at school." Middle school is hard enough without my dad becoming a meme or something. Despite everything, Nathan found himself laughing a genuine sound that surprised him given the circumstances. "I promise to keep my embarrassing dad moments to a minimum," he said, pocketing his phone and grabbing his keys from the counter. "Now come on, we are going to be late, and I know how you feel about tardiness." "I feel like it is a choice," Sophie declared as she followed him toward the garage door. "A bad choice made by people who do not respect other people's time." Nathan smiled at his daughter's conviction, a trait she had definitely inherited from him, rather than her mother, who had never met a deadline she could not push or a commitment she could not break. As they climbed into his sensible sedan and backed out of the driveway, he tried to push the text message disaster to the back of his mind and focus on the morning routine that had become the backbone of their lives together. "Before we continue, please tell us where in the world are you tuning in from?" We love seeing how far our stories travel. The drive to Westbrook Middle School usually took about 15 minutes, but this morning it felt like an eternity as Nathan's mind raced through every possible scenario that might unfold when he arrived at work. His phone sat in the cup holder between them, ominously silent, and he was not sure if Victoria's lack of response was better or worse than an immediate angry reply. Maybe she had not really read it. Maybe she had just glanced at her phone and swiped the notification away without actually processing the words. Maybe she was in a meeting and would forget about it entirely by the time she had a chance to respond. Maybe pigs would sprout wings and the Cleveland Browns would win the Super Bowl. Dad, you missed the turn. Nathan blinked, realizing he had driven straight past the entrance to Sophie's school and was now heading toward the highway on-ramp. Sorry, kiddo, he muttered, executing a careful U-turn at the next intersection. Head's not in the game today. Sophie studied him with those observant eyes that reminded him so painfully of her mother, the same shape and color but filled with a warmth and loyalty that Caroline had never possessed. Is this about Miss Mitchell? Nathan nearly swerved the car into oncoming traffic? What? Why would you say that? His voice came out approximately 2 octaves higher than normal, which did absolutely nothing to support his attempt at playing dumb. Sophie rolled her eyes with all the dramatic flair of pre-adolescence. Because you got all weird and smiley after meeting her yesterday, she said matter-of-factly, like she was explaining basic mathematics to someone who should really know better. And I heard you talking to Uncle Derek on the phone last night, asking him if you were crazy for thinking about asking her out. Nathan groaned, his cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Were you eavesdropping again? We have talked about this, Sophie. The walls are thin, she replied with a shrug that held zero remorse. And you were not exactly whispering. I could hear you from my bedroom, and I was trying to sleep. Nathan made a mental note to either lower his voice during future phone calls or invest in some serious soundproofing. I am sorry I kept you awake, he said, dodging the actual substance of her observation. But Sophie was not about to let him off that easily. She turned in her seat to face him fully, her expression suddenly serious, in a way that made her look much older than her 12 years. Dad, Mom has been gone for 4 years. It is okay if you like someone. The simple statement delivered with such matter-of-fact certainty hit Nathan like a punch to the chest. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel and stared straight ahead at the road, not trusting himself to look at his daughter while processing the unexpected permission she was offering. Sophie. I was not planning to. Dad. She cut him off with a gentle firmness that she must have learned from watching him navigate countless difficult conversations over the years. Miss Mitchell seems nice. You seemed happy when you were talking about her. I am not a little kid anymore. I can handle you going on a date. Nathan pulled into the school drop-off lane and put the car in park, finally turning to face his daughter. When did you get so grown up? He asked, his voice rough with emotion he was trying very hard to contain. Sophie grinned, the serious moment passing as quickly as it had arrived. I have always been grown up, she informed him. You are just finally noticing. Now go to work. Do not stress about your text thing, and maybe consider actually asking Miss Mitchell out instead of just texting Uncle Derek about it like a teenager. Nathan shook his head in amazement. Have a good day at school, sweetheart. Love you. Love you too, Sophie said, climbing out of the car and slinging her backpack over both shoulders. And Dad, maybe just tell your boss the truth. You met a teacher you think she is pretty. You texted a friend about it. It is not like that is against the rules or anything. She slammed the door before he could respond and walked toward the school entrance with the confident stride of someone who had just solved a problem that did not concern her in the slightest. Nathan watched her until she disappeared through the double doors, feeling a familiar mix of pride and grief wash over him. Raising Sophie alone had not been easy. There had been days when he was certain he was failing her nights, when he had cried in the shower, so she would not hear moments when the weight of being her only parent had felt like it might crush him entirely. But watching her walk away strong and confident, and so impossibly wise for her age, Nathan allowed himself to believe that maybe despite all his mistakes and shortcomings they were doing okay. The offices of Hayes and Crawford Accounting Partners occupied 3 floors of a glass and steel tower in the financial district, the kind of building that was designed to impress clients with its sleek modernity and intimidate employees with its cold efficiency. Nathan had worked here for 8 years, starting as a junior accountant fresh out of his CPA exam, and slowly climbing the ranks through a combination of hard work, attention to detail, and a willingness to take on projects that other people avoided. The promotion to senior accountant had been his goal for the past 3 years, a position that would mean a significant salary increase, more responsibility, and perhaps most importantly, the validation that he could succeed at something even after his personal life had fallen apart so spectacularly. Now, as he rode the elevator up to the 14th floor, Nathan wondered if a single text message had just destroyed everything he had worked so hard to build. Victoria Hayes' corner office was visible from his desk, a constant reminder of the hierarchy that governed their professional lives. Through the glass walls, he could see that her chair was empty, her computer dark, and her assistant Linda was typing away at her own desk with the focused intensity of someone who had 1,000 things to do and no time to do them. "Is Victoria in yet?" Nathan asked, stopping by Linda's desk and trying to sound casual despite his racing heart. Linda glanced up, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "She is in back-to-back meetings all morning," she replied, her tone neutral, but her eyes sharp with curiosity. "Did you need something?" "No," Nathan said quickly. Perhaps too quickly. "Just had a question about the Morrison file, but it can wait." He retreated to his own office, a modest space with a window that looked out onto the building across the street, and tried to focus on the stack of work waiting for him. But every time he attempted to concentrate on a spreadsheet or review a client's quarterly report, his mind drifted back to the text message and the awful silence that had followed. By lunchtime, Nathan was a complete wreck. He had checked his phone approximately 400 times, jumped out of his skin whenever someone walked past his door, and accomplished virtually nothing of value, despite staring at his computer screen for hours. "You look like absolute hell." Nathan looked up to find Derek standing in his doorway, a paper bag from their favorite sandwich shop in one hand, and an expression of concern on his face. Derek Thompson had been Nathan's best friend since their freshman year of college, standing beside him through graduations and job changes and a wedding and a divorce that was not really a divorce because Caroline had not bothered with the legal paperwork when she had abandoned them. "Thanks for the confidence boost," Nathan muttered, but he was already standing and reaching for his jacket. "Please tell me there is a turkey club in that bag." "With extra pickles, just like you like it," Derek confirmed. "Now come on, you are going to tell me why you look like you have not slept in a week, and I am going to tell you why you are probably overreacting." They walked to a small park across the street from the office building, finding their usual bench beneath an oak tree that was just beginning to change colors with the approaching autumn. Nathan unwrapped his sandwich, but found he had no appetite, his stomach too twisted with anxiety to accept food. So Derek prompted, taking a large bite of his own sandwich with the casual ease of someone whose career was not currently imploding. "What is going on?" Nathan pulled out his phone and handed it over, watching Derek's face as he read the text message and then checked the recipient. Derek winced. "Ice Queen Victoria. Oh man, that is rough." He handed the phone back, his expression sympathetic, but not panicked. "But hey, maybe she will just ignore it. Pretend it never happened. Victoria does not seem like the type to engage with personal drama. Or maybe she is building a case to deny my promotion," Nathan countered, picking at the bread of his sandwich without actually eating any of it. "You know how she is about professionalism. She once made Jenkins from accounting rewrite an entire presentation because he used a font she considered too casual." "That is fair," Derek admitted. "But here is the thing, Nate. You did not say anything inappropriate. You said a woman was gorgeous, and that you cannot stop thinking about her smile. That is not harassment. That is not offensive. It is just human. It is unprofessional, Nathan insisted. And Victoria Hayes has zero tolerance for unprofessional behavior. Derek leaned back against the bench, studying his friend with the knowing look of someone who had witnessed Nathan's slow retreat from life over the past 4 years. "Can I ask you something?" Nathan shrugged. "Sure. Are you going to ask her out? The teacher?" The question hung in the air between them, and Nathan found himself thinking about Grace Mitchell for the first time since the text message disaster had consumed his attention. The way she had smiled when he had asked about Sophie's progress. The warmth in her voice when she had talked about literature and the power of stories. The red dress that had hugged her curves in a way that had made it very difficult for Nathan to concentrate on anything she was actually saying. "I do not know," he admitted finally. "Sophie seems okay with the idea, which surprised me, but it has been so long since I have dated anyone. After Caroline left, I just focused on Sophie, on making sure she was okay, on keeping our heads above water." "And you have done an amazing job," Derek said firmly. "Sophie is a great kid, and that is because of you. But Nathan, you are 38 years old. You are not dead. You deserve to have a life too, not just an existence." Before Nathan could respond to this observation, his phone buzzed with an incoming text. He glanced down at the screen and felt his blood run cold. Victoria Hayes. My office. 2 p.m. That was it. No context, no indication of mood or intent, just 5 words that somehow managed to convey absolute authority and ominous finality. Nathan showed the message to Derek, who grimaced. "That is Victoria for you," Derek said. Minimal words, maximum dread. But hey, maybe it is about the Henderson account. You have been working on that, right? Maybe Nathan agreed, not believing it for a second. The rest of lunch passed in a blur of anxiety and speculation, Nathan's sandwich remaining largely uneaten as he contemplated the various ways his career might be about to end. When they finally returned to the office, Derek clapped him on the shoulder with what was probably meant to be reassuring force. "Whatever happens," Derek said, "you have got people in your corner. Remember that." Nathan nodded, appreciating the sentiment, even if it did nothing to calm the storm of worry raging through his chest. He had 2 hours until his meeting with Victoria, 2 hours to either prepare the perfect explanation or completely lose his mind. Based on current trajectory, it was looking like the latter was more likely. The walk from Nathan's office to Victoria Hayes' corner suite felt like a death march, each step bringing him closer to a confrontation he was absolutely not prepared to have. He had spent the past 2 hours rehearsing various explanations and apologies, but now that the moment had arrived, every carefully crafted sentence had abandoned him entirely. Victoria's assistant, Linda, nodded toward the glass door. "She is expecting you." Nathan knocked twice his knuckles, rapping against the frosted glass with more confidence than he actually felt. "Come in, Collins." He pushed open the door and stepped into Victoria's office, a space that was somehow both impressive and intimidating in equal measure. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, while the furniture was all clean lines and expensive materials that spoke to both success and restraint. Victoria herself sat behind her massive desk, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in its usual severe bun, reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed some document he could not see from where he stood. "Close the door," she instructed without looking up. "Then sit." Nathan did as he was told, settling into one of the leather chairs facing her desk and trying not to fidget like a nervous schoolboy called to the principal's office. He waited in silence while Victoria finished whatever she was reading, the seconds stretching into what felt like hours as his anxiety continued to build. Finally, she set aside the document and removed her glasses, fixing him with those penetrating gray eyes that had made countless employees squirm over the years. "I received an unusual text from you this morning," she said, getting straight to the point with the directness that was her trademark. "Yes, about that." Nathan began his carefully rehearsed explanation, immediately deserting him. "I am so sorry. It was meant for a friend. I was not paying attention to who I was texting, and I hit send before I realized my mistake. It was completely unprofessional of me, and I can assure you it will never happen again." Victoria held up a hand, cutting off his rambling apology. "Who is she?" Nathan blinked, caught off guard by the question. "I am sorry," the woman in the text. Victoria's expression remained unreadable, but there was something in her tone that did not quite match the Ice Queen reputation she had cultivated. "Who is she?" Nathan swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. "My daughter's English teacher. I met her at parent-teacher conferences last night." "I see." Another long pause, during which Nathan was certain his heart was going to beat its way right out of his chest. He waited for the reprimand, the lecture about professional boundaries, the announcement that his promotion was no longer being considered. Instead, Victoria leaned back in her chair and studied him with an expression that was almost thoughtful. "How long have you been a single father, Collins?" The question surprised Nathan so much that he answered honestly without thinking. 4 years. My wife left when Sophie was 8. Victoria nodded slowly, something flickering in her eyes that he could not quite identify. "And in those 4 years, have you dated anyone?" "No." Nathan admitted, feeling increasingly confused by the direction this conversation was taking. "I have been focused on Sophie on my work. Dating has not been a priority." Another long silence stretched between them. Then Victoria did something Nathan had never seen her do in 8 years of working together. She sighed. "Be careful, Collins." She said, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. "Hearts are fragile things, especially when children are involved." Nathan stared at her, completely at a loss for how to respond to this unexpected display of what? Empathy, understanding, concern. Victoria seemed to realize she had revealed more than intended, because her expression quickly shifted back to its usual professional mask. "That text was inappropriate for a work phone," she said crisply. "Keep your personal life separate from company communication in the future. Am I clear?" "Yes, ma'am," Nathan managed. "Completely clear. Good." She picked up her reading glasses, a clear dismissal. "Your promotion review is in 2 weeks. I suggest you focus on that." Nathan stood on slightly shaky legs, still trying to process what had just happened. "Thank you, Miss Hayes." He was almost to the door when her voice stopped him. "Collins." He turned back, hand on the doorknob. "For what it is worth," Victoria said, not looking up from her desk, "the fact that you are worried about being unprofessional suggests you are exactly the kind of person who does not need to worry about it. Do not overthink this." Nathan left her office in a daze, his mind spinning with questions he did not have answers to. What was that look in her eyes? What did she know about fragile hearts? And why, after 8 years of barely acknowledging his existence beyond work-related matters, had Victoria Hayes suddenly shown him something that looked remarkably like compassion? Have you ever had to be strong for someone else while falling apart inside Stay With Us? Nathan's story might be your story too. The memories came flooding back that night, as they always did, when something cracked open the carefully sealed compartment where Nathan kept his grief. He sat alone in the living room after Sophie had gone to bed, a glass of whiskey untouched on the coffee table beside him, and let himself remember the day his world had ended. 4 years ago, on a Tuesday that had started like any other, Nathan had been sitting in his office reviewing quarterly reports when a strange feeling had settled over him. He could not explain, it could not rationalize it, but something had felt wrong in a way that made him check his phone repeatedly for messages that never came. By 3 o'clock, the feeling had grown strong enough that he had left work early, something he never did, and driven home with a sense of urgency he did not understand. The house had been too quiet when he opened the front door. Caroline's car was gone, which was not unusual. Her purse was not on the hook by the door, which also was not unusual. But something about the quality of the silence, the absence of her perfume that usually lingered in the entryway, the way the air itself seemed to have changed, had told Nathan that something was very, very wrong. He had found the note on the kitchen counter, written in Caroline's elegant handwriting on a piece of stationery she had bought at a boutique in the city. I cannot do this anymore. I am not meant to be a mother or a wife. Do not look for me. Caroline. Nathan had read those words at least a dozen times, waiting for them to rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Something that did not mean his wife of 9 years had just walked away from their family without even saying goodbye. He had sunk to the kitchen floor, his back against the cabinets. The note crumpled in his fist, and he had stayed there until he heard the school bus rumble past the house and remembered that his daughter would be home in minutes, that she would walk through that door, expecting to find her mother, and that he would have to tell her something, anything that would not destroy her completely. Sophie had found him still sitting on the floor, which in retrospect was probably not the best introduction to the worst moment of her young life. Daddy, where is Mommy? Nathan had pulled himself together through sheer force of will, had scooped his 8-year-old daughter into his arms and carried her to the living room, had sat her down on the couch, and tried to explain that Mommy had gone away, that she was not coming back, that it was not Sophie's fault, that Daddy was going to take care of everything. Sophie had cried for hours, asking questions Nathan could not answer, wanting explanations he did not have. Why did Mommy leave? Did she not love us? Is she coming back? Did I do something wrong? That first night, Nathan had lain in his daughter's bed with her holding her, while she sobbed herself to sleep, while he stared at the ceiling and wondered how he was supposed to do this alone, how he was supposed to be both mother and father to a child whose mother had abandoned her without a backward glance. The first year had been brutal in ways Nathan had not known were possible. Sophie had nightmares almost every night, waking up screaming for a mother who was not coming. Nathan had learned to function on 3 or 4 hours of sleep, stumbling through his days at work, before racing home to pick up his daughter from the after-school program, his heart clenching every time he saw her sitting alone, waiting for him, her eyes scanning his face for signs that he might leave too. He had learned to do things he had never done before, braiding hair from YouTube tutorials watched at 2 in the morning when he could not sleep, packing lunches that were nutritious, but also something a 3rd grader would actually eat, helping with homework in subjects he barely remembered from his own school days, navigating the politics of parent groups and birthday parties and playdates, where other mothers looked at him with expressions that ranged from pity to suspicion. He had burned countless dinners before discovering that Sophie actually preferred his scrambled eggs to anything Caroline had ever made. He had forgotten permission slips and shown up late to school events, and sent his daughter to picture day with a crooked ponytail that had made her cry when she saw the photos. The shame had been constant, a low-level hum of inadequacy that colored everything he did. He was the only father at most PTA meetings, the only man in the pickup line who clearly had no idea what he was doing. Other mothers would offer help in tones that felt more like judgment, their eyes filled with pity that made Nathan want to scream that he was doing his best, that he was trying, that just because he was a man did not mean he was incapable of raising his own child. The guilt had been worse than the shame. Nathan had spent countless nights lying awake wondering what he had done wrong, what he had missed, what he could have changed. He had replayed their marriage in his mind, searching for signs he should have seen, warnings he should have heeded. Had Caroline been unhappy? Had she given him signals he had been too oblivious to notice? Had he driven her away, somehow failed her, in ways he did not understand? Caroline's family had cut contact almost immediately, taking their daughter's side, without even hearing Nathan's. His own parents retired, and living in Florida had offered support from a distance, but they were too far away to provide the daily help he desperately needed. The nights had been the hardest after Sophie was finally asleep, and Nathan was alone with his thoughts and the echoing silence of a house that had once held a family of 3. He would sit in the dark living room, staring at wedding photos he could not bring himself to take down, wondering if he would ever feel whole again. Slowly, painfully, they had found their rhythm. Nathan had learned to wake up early enough to make breakfast without rushing to pack lunches the night before, so mornings were not chaotic to schedule work meetings around school pickup times, so Sophie never had to wait and wonder if he was coming. They had developed traditions that belonged only to them. Friday pizza nights, where they ate in front of the TV and watched movies that were probably too old for Sophie, but that she loved anyway. Saturday morning pancakes that Nathan made from scratch, the recipe improving each week until Sophie declared them better than any restaurant. The first time Sophie had laughed, really laughed, after months of sadness and nightmares and questions without answers. Nathan had cried in the bathroom afterward, overwhelmed with relief that maybe somehow they were going to survive this. But the loneliness had remained a constant companion that Nathan had learned to ignore rather than address. He had turned down every setup, every well-meaning friend who tried to introduce him to someone, every suggestion that he should get back out there and start dating again. His entire identity had become Sophie's dad. Nothing more, nothing less. And he had convinced himself that was enough, that he did not need romance, did not deserve it, after failing so spectacularly at marriage the first time. The truth buried beneath layers of self-protection was simpler and more painful than any of that. He was afraid that if he let anyone in, they might leave too. And this time, Sophie would be old enough to remember it, old enough to be truly damaged by another abandonment, another person choosing to walk away from them. So Nathan had built walls around his heart and told himself they were protection. He had not realized they were also a prison. Across town, in a small apartment filled with books and soft lighting, and the lingering loneliness that came from too many evenings spent alone, Grace Mitchell was having her own trip down memory lane. She sat curled in her reading chair, a cup of tea, growing cold on the table beside her grading papers from her 7th grade English class, with only half her attention. The other half kept drifting back to the parent-teacher conferences from the previous evening, and to one parent in particular. Nathan Cole. Sophie Cole's father, a single dad, who had asked thoughtful questions about his daughter's reading progress, rather than demanding to know why she was not getting better grades. A man whose entire face had softened when he talked about Sophie, whose eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, whose attention had felt like sunlight after years of shadows. Grace had worn her red dress to the conferences, the one that made her feel confident and put together, and she had caught Nathan Cole looking at her in a way that had made her pulse quicken, despite every promise she had made to herself about not hoping, not wanting, not letting herself be vulnerable again. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Emily. Any cute single dads at conferences tonight, followed by a string of winking emojis that made Grace roll her eyes. I am done looking. Remember, she typed back the response automatic now, after 3 years of deflecting her sister's well-meaning attempts at matchmaking. But even as she sent the message, her mind kept circling back to Nathan, to the warmth in his voice, to the way he had made her laugh with a self-deprecating comment about his lack of expertise in literature, to the red that had crept up his neck when their hands had accidentally brushed while passing paperwork back and forth. Stop it, Grace told herself firmly. You know better than this. She did know better. She had learned the lesson in the most painful way possible 3 years ago, when the man she had thought would be her forever had proven that forever had conditions, that love had limits, that she was not worth staying for. Grace had met Ryan during her 2nd year of teaching at a friend's birthday party, where he had spilled wine on her dress and spent the rest of the evening apologizing with such charming self-deprecation that she had given him her number before she could talk herself out of it. Their relationship had been everything Grace had dreamed about as a lonely little girl, growing up in a chaotic household where love was conditional and attention had to be earned. Ryan was attentive and affectionate, showing up with flowers for no reason, remembering small details from conversations weeks earlier, making her feel seen and cherished in ways she had never experienced before. They had dated for 3 years, moved in together after 2, and gotten engaged on a beach vacation, where Ryan had written their names in the sand and gotten down on one knee as the sun set over the water. Grace had said yes without hesitation, certain that she had finally found her person, that the fairy tale she had given up hope of experiencing was actually happening to her. Then came the diagnosis. A routine doctor's appointment had led to tests, which had led to specialists, which had led to a conversation in a sterile office, where a doctor with kind eyes and a gentle voice had explained that Grace's chances of having biological children were very low. Not impossible, she had been careful to say, but not likely either. Grace had cried in her car for an hour before driving home to tell Ryan, terrified of his reaction, but trusting in the love they had built together over 3 years. His initial response had been everything she had hoped for. "We will figure it out together," Ryan had said, holding her while she sobbed. "This does not change anything. I love you, not your reproductive system." But over the following months, his words and his actions had started to diverge. He had become distant, finding excuses to work late or spend weekends with friends instead of with her. Conversations about the future that had once been filled with excitement and shared dreams became tense and abbreviated, with Ryan changing the subject whenever Grace mentioned children or family. She had made excuses for him the way women are taught to do, the way she had learned from watching her own mother smooth over her father's shortcomings until the marriage finally collapsed under the weight of everything left unsaid. "He is just processing," she told herself. "He needs time to adjust. If I'm patient enough, understanding enough, he will come around." Her own mother's voice had echoed in her head. "Do not be demanding. Do not be needy. Men do not like women who need too much." So Grace had buried her pain, and her fear had stopped talking about the diagnosis, had tried to be the perfect, uncomplicated partner who did not require emotional labor or difficult conversations. It had not mattered. 6 months after the diagnosis, 4 months before their scheduled wedding, Ryan had finally admitted the truth during a dinner at the expensive restaurant where they had had their first date. "I want a real family, Grace, a complete one. Kids of my own." The word complete had hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath and shattering something fundamental inside her. "I am not complete," she had asked, her voice barely a whisper. "That is not what I meant," Ryan had said, but they both knew it was exactly what he had meant. "This is not your fault. It is just, I have to be honest about what I want for my life, and I cannot give that up." He had paid for dinner, driven her home in silence, and moved out of their shared apartment over the weekend, while she stayed with her sister and tried to process the destruction of everything she had believed about love and commitment and the future she had thought she was building. The aftermath had been brutal in ways Grace still did not like to think about. Canceling the wedding venue, the caterer, the photographer, returning the dress, calling relatives and friends to explain that there would not be a ceremony after all. The pitying looks, the whispered speculation, the way some people could not quite hide their relief that Grace's perfect relationship had turned out to be not so perfect after all. Her mother's response had been the most painful. "Maybe if you had told him earlier," she had said in a tone that suggested Grace had somehow deceived Ryan, trapped him into an engagement under false pretenses, as if her worth as a woman and a partner could be measured by her fertility, as if she had done something wrong by not knowing about a medical condition she had not discovered until they were already planning their wedding. Grace had moved to a new city, taken a job at a new school, and started over with the determination of someone who had learned a valuable lesson about the limits of love. She had thrown herself into teaching, pouring all the maternal energy she had once hoped to give her own children into the students who filled her classroom. She had made her classroom a sanctuary, a place where kids who felt lost or overlooked could find someone who believed in them, who saw their potential, who would not give up on them. She had told herself that was enough, that teaching was her purpose, that she did not need romance or partnership or the family she had once dreamed about. For 3 years, she had believed it, until Nathan Cole had walked into her classroom for parent-teacher conferences, looking nervous and proud and completely devoted to his daughter, and something in Grace's chest had shifted in a way she had sworn she would never allow again. She had tried dating once about a year after the broken engagement, a man from a dating app who had seemed nice enough, normal enough, interested enough. The dinner had ended when Grace mentioned casually that having biological children was not likely for her. She had watched his face change, watched the interest drain from his eyes, watched him suddenly remember an early meeting he had the next day. He had never called again. She had never tried again. Better to be alone than to see that look of disappointment, that recalculation of her worth based on something she could not control. Now grading papers in her quiet apartment with her cold tea and her protective loneliness, Grace found herself thinking about Nathan Cole in ways that felt dangerous and irresponsible. The way he had looked at her when she laughed, not with hunger, not with the calculated assessment she had learned to recognize and avoid, but with something that looked like warmth, like genuine interest in who she was. Not just what she could offer. He is a single father, she reminded herself. He probably wants more children. He probably wants a complete family. The word complete made her flinch even now, 3 years later. She forced herself to return her attention to the papers in front of her, to the earnest handwriting of 12-year-olds trying to make sense of To Kill a Mockingbird and their own place in a complicated world. Hope only leads to hurt, she told herself firmly. You know this. Do not forget it. But somewhere deep inside, in a place she had tried very hard to wall off, a small voice whispered, "But what if this time is different?" Grace ignored it the way she had learned to ignore all the parts of herself that wanted more than safety and solitude. It was easier that way. Lonelier, but easier. 3 days after the text message incident that had nearly given Nathan a heart attack, the universe decided to intervene in a way he never could have planned. It was Saturday morning, their sacred father-daughter time, and Nathan had brought Sophie to Riverside Park for their weekly tradition of fresh air and quality time away from screens and responsibilities. The October weather was perfect, crisp enough to require light jackets, but warm enough to enjoy being outside, and the trees had begun their annual transformation into a symphony of reds and golds and oranges. Sophie had claimed their usual bench near the walking path, her nose already buried in a book that Grace Mitchell had recommended during their conference, while Nathan made his way to the coffee cart to get their customary drinks. Hot chocolate for Sophie, because she insisted it was a fundamental human right during fall months, and black coffee for himself, because he needed the caffeine after another sleepless night, spent overthinking everything. He was just turning away from the cart, a cup in each hand, when he nearly collided with someone walking the opposite direction. "Oh, I am so sorry I was not watching where I was going," he started, and then he looked up, and his brain short-circuited entirely. Grace Mitchell stood in front of him, her blonde hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. Her cheeks flushed from what appeared to be a morning run, wearing athletic clothes that somehow managed to make her look even more beautiful than the red dress had. "Mr. Tobaro." Her eyes widened with recognition, then crinkled with what looked like genuine pleasure. What are the chances Nathan's mouth opened but no words came out? He was acutely aware that he was wearing his oldest jeans and a faded college sweatshirt, that his hair was probably sticking up in 17 different directions, and that he was holding 2 cups of hot beverages that he was almost certainly about to spill all over both of them. "Miss Mitchell," he finally managed, his voice slightly strangled. "Hi. Hello. I am here with Sophie. We come here on Saturdays. It is kind of our thing." He was rambling. He needed to stop rambling. But Grace was smiling at him with that warm, genuine smile that had been haunting his dreams for the past 3 days, and apparently that made his brain stop functioning entirely. "Is Sophie here?" Grace asked, glancing around the park with what seemed like authentic interest. "I would love to say hello if she is not too absorbed in whatever she is reading." Nathan pointed toward their bench, where Sophie was indeed completely absorbed in her book, oblivious to her father's social crisis happening 30 feet away. "She is right over there. I am sure she would be happy to see you. She has not stopped talking about the book you recommended." Grace's face lit up in a way that made Nathan's heart do something complicated. Pride, maybe, or satisfaction at having reached a student. "Let me guess. She wants to discuss symbolism, and whether Atticus Finch is actually as heroic as everyone thinks he is. How did you know? Because that is exactly the kind of reader Sophie is. Grace's smile turned fond. She does not just absorb information, she wrestles with it, questions it. It is rare, especially in 7th graders. Nathan felt a warm glow of parental pride spreading through his chest. She gets that from her mother, he said automatically, and then immediately wished he could take it back. But Grace just nodded, her expression understanding, rather than awkward. The good traits usually come from somewhere, she said lightly. The bad ones, those we blame on grandparents. Despite his nervousness, Nathan found himself laughing. That is probably fair. My dad does have some questionable opinions about putting ketchup on eggs. That is not a bad trait. That is a crime against breakfast, Grace declared with mock severity. And just like that, the awkwardness dissolved into something easier, more natural. They walked together toward Sophie's bench, the conversation flowing more smoothly than Nathan would have thought possible given his earlier inability to form complete sentences. Grace asked about their Saturday traditions, and Nathan found himself telling her about the pizza nights and the pancake experiments and the elaborate rating system Sophie had developed for various breakfast cereals. By the time they reached the bench, Sophie had looked up from her book and spotted them approaching together. Nathan watched his daughter's eyes widen, then narrow with a calculating interest that made him slightly nervous. Miss Mitchell-Sophie closed her book and stood up with an enthusiasm that seemed just a bit too deliberate. "What are you doing here?" "I live a few blocks away," Grace explained. "I run here on weekends when the weather cooperates. I did not know this was your Saturday spot, too. It is our favorite," Sophie said. And then, with the subtlety of a freight train, "You should sit with us. Dad always gets too much food from the coffee cart, and it is weird when he talks to himself about whatever is bothering him." Nathan protested, his cheeks flushing, but Grace was laughing, and she did not seem to be looking for an escape route. "Actually, I was just going to sit and read for a while. I would love the company if you do not mind sharing your bench." What followed was an hour that felt like 10 minutes, the three of them talking and laughing as if they had known each other for years, instead of having met once at a school function. Sophie peppered Grace with questions about books and writing, and whether English teachers ever got sick of reading the same assignments over and over. Grace answered each question thoughtfully, treating Sophie like an equal rather than a child, which Nathan noticed and appreciated more than he could express. At some point, Sophie announced that she needed to use the bathroom and disappeared with suspicious speed, leaving Nathan and Grace alone on the bench with the suddenly charged air between them. "She is not very subtle, is she?" Grace observed, amusement coloring her voice. "She gets that from me," Nathan admitted. "I have never been good at hiding my intentions." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a recognition, an acknowledgement of the current that had been running beneath their conversation all morning. Grace started, then stopped biting her lip in a way that made it very difficult for him to concentrate on whatever she was about to say. "Yes." She took a breath. "This is probably inappropriate for me to say as your daughter's teacher, but I have really enjoyed this morning, talking to you, being around both of you." Nathan's heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "I have enjoyed it too, more than I have enjoyed anything in a long time, actually." Another pause, heavy with possibility. "Would you maybe want to get coffee sometime?" The words tumbled out of Nathan's mouth before he could second-guess them into oblivion. Not school-related, I mean. Just coffee, or dinner, or whatever you prefer. I am flexible. He was rambling again. He really needed to work on that. But Grace was smiling that warm, genuine smile that had become his new favorite thing in the world. "I would like that," she said simply. "I would like that. A lot." They exchanged phone numbers, personal ones this time, their fingers brushing as they passed phones back and forth. When Sophie returned from her conveniently timed bathroom break, she took one look at their faces and grinned so widely that Nathan was afraid her face might split in half. "You actually did it," she hissed at him as Grace walked away with a final wave. You actually asked her out, I did. Nathan confirmed, still slightly in shock. I really did. About time, Sophie declared. She tucked her hand into his as they walked toward the car, and Nathan felt something he had not felt in years. Hope. The following Friday evening found Nathan standing in front of his bedroom mirror, changing shirts for the 4th time, while Derek's voice came through his phone on speaker. Just wear the blue one. Derek said with the exasperated patience of someone who had witnessed many of Nathan's crisis moments over the years. You look good in blue. Grace will love it. What if she does not? Nathan countered, buttoning the blue shirt and immediately unbuttoning it again. What if this is all a mistake? What if I have forgotten how to do this? Do what? Go on a date. It is not that complicated. You show up. You make conversation. You do not talk about your ex or your bowel movements, and you pay for dinner. Your romantic advice is really inspiring, Nathan muttered, finally settling on the blue shirt and tucking it into his best jeans. I am married to a woman who finds my mediocrity charming. I am clearly doing something right. Sophie appeared in his doorway, arms crossed, expression critical. Not that tie, Dad. Trust me. Nathan looked down at the tie in his hand, then back at his daughter. What is wrong with this tie? Everything, Sophie said definitively. You are going to a casual dinner, not a job interview. Lose the tie entirely. And maybe unbutton one more button on the shirt. You look like you are about to sell someone life insurance. Derek's laughter came through the phone. Listen to your kid, Nate. She has got better instincts than both of us combined. Nathan removed the tie and undid the top button of his shirt, feeling simultaneously ridiculous and grateful for the assistance. How do you know so much about this? He asked Sophie. You are 12. I read, Sophie said simply. Books have dates in them. Also, I have watched approximately 1 million romantic comedies when you thought I was doing homework. We are going to talk about that later, Nathan said. But he was smiling. By the time Mrs. Henderson from next door arrived to stay with Sophie for the evening. Nathan had been coached through his outfit choice, his talking points, and his contingency plans for various conversation topics. He felt prepared, nervous, and slightly nauseous in a way that reminded him of his first date with Caroline all those years ago. Except this felt different somehow. Bigger. More important. Do not overthink it, Sophie advised as he headed for the door. Just be yourself. She already likes you, or she would not have said yes. When did you get so wise? Nathan asked, kissing the top of her head. I have always been wise, Sophie replied. You are just finally listening. Grace was already at the restaurant when Nathan arrived, seated at a small table near the window, and his breath caught when he saw her. She was wearing a soft blue dress that brought out her eyes, her blonde hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders, and she was fidgeting with her napkin in a way that told him she was nervous too. Somehow that made him feel better. Hi, he said, sliding into the seat across from her. You look beautiful. The blush that crept up her cheeks was gratifying. Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself. They ordered wine and appetizers, and at first the conversation was slightly stilted. Both of them, too aware of the significance of the moment, too careful with their words. But gradually, as the wine warmed them, and the restaurant noise faded into background music, they found their rhythm. Can I ask you something personal? Grace asked, twirling the stem of her wine glass between her fingers. Of course. What happened with Sophie's mother? Nathan took a breath, the familiar weight of the story settling on his shoulders. She left, he said simply. 4 years ago. One day she was there. The next. She was gone. No warning, no real explanation. Just a note saying she was not meant to be a mother or a wife. Grace's hand moved across the table, her fingers brushing against his knuckles in a gesture of comfort. I'm so sorry. That must have been devastating. Nathan nodded, surprised to find that talking about it did not hurt as much as it usually did. It was hard. The hardest thing I've ever done. But Sophie and I got through it together. We built a new normal. It is not the life I imagined, but it is ours. Grace was quiet for a moment, her eyes soft with understanding. Thank you for telling me. Nathan turned his hand over, catching her fingers in his. Can I ask you something now? Fair is fair. Have you ever been married? He watched her expression flicker a shadow passing over her features before she composed herself again. Engaged once. It did not work out. She did not offer details, and Nathan did not push. They both had scars, histories, parts of themselves they were not ready to share yet. That was okay. There was time. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of conversation and laughter, and the growing certainty that something important was happening between them. They discovered shared interests in old movies and terrible puns, and the particular joy of morning walks when the world was still quiet and full of possibility. Nathan found himself telling stories he had not shared with anyone about the early days of single parenthood, about learning to braid hair from YouTube tutorials, about the first time Sophie had laughed after months of sadness, and how he had cried in the bathroom afterward. Grace told him about teaching about the students who had changed her life, about the magic of watching a struggling reader suddenly fall in love with books. She did not talk about her past. Not really. But Nathan could see the shadows of something painful in her eyes, and he found himself wanting to know everything about her, the light and the dark alike. When the restaurant began to empty, and the waitstaff started giving them pointed looks, they finally asked for the check, each of them reluctant to let the evening end. I had a really good time, Grace said as they walked toward the parking lot. Me too, Nathan agreed. The best time I have had in years, actually. They stopped beside her car, and the moment turned electric with possibility. Nathan's heart was pounding, his palms slightly sweaty, his mind racing through every movie he had ever seen, where this was the moment the guy was supposed to make a move. Grace solved the problem for him by rising up on her toes and pressing a soft kiss to his cheek, her lips warm against his skin, her perfume filling his senses. Thank you, she whispered, for tonight. For seeing me. Thank you for saying yes. Nathan replied, his voice rougher than he intended. She smiled that smile that had become his favorite sight in the world and climbed into her car. Can we do this again? He asked before she could close the door. Her smile widened. I would like that. A lot. Nathan watched her drive away, then stood alone in the parking lot for a long moment, grinning like an idiot at the stars. When he finally got home and checked his phone, there was a text from Derek. Well, how did it go? He typed back. Best first date of my life. Derek's reply was immediate. About damn time, buddy. Have you ever watched two broken people slowly learn to trust again? Keep watching. This is where everything changes. The months that followed were the happiest Nathan could remember, a time of healing and hope, and the slow, beautiful process of building something real with Grace. Their relationship deepened in 1,000 small ways. Grace learned that Nathan stress cleaned when he was anxious, and she started showing up with takeout on his most chaotic workdays so he would not scrub the grout until midnight. Nathan learned that Grace got quiet when she was sad, not loud, and he learned to recognize the silence and simply sit with her until she was ready to talk. Sophie became the enthusiastic architect of their family's growing closeness. She invited Grace to judge their Saturday pancake contests, created elaborate rating systems for the various books Grace recommended, and started leaving notes for Grace to find when she came over. Things like, "This is Dad's favorite spot on the couch. He pretends not to have one, but he does. And Dad makes the best pancakes, but do not tell him I said so because his ego is already big enough." Grace received these notes with the seriousness they deserved, responding in kind with recommendations for Sophie and observations about Nathan that made him blush and his daughter cackle with delight. 3 months in, Grace attended Sophie's school play, sitting beside Nathan in the uncomfortable auditorium seats and squeezing his hand when Sophie delivered her 3 lines with all the dramatic intensity of a Broadway star. "She is wonderful," Grace whispered, leaning close so only he could hear. "You have done an amazing job with her." "She does the hard work," Nathan replied. "I just try to keep up." But Grace was shaking her head. "Do not do that. Do not minimize what you have built. Raising a child alone is impossible, and you have somehow made it look easy. It is not easy." Nathan admitted, his voice rough with emotion he was trying to contain. "But it is easier with you." Their weekends settled into comfortable patterns. Hikes where Sophie ran ahead on the trail, giving them time to talk about everything and nothing. Movie nights on Nathan's couch, all three of them tucked under the same blanket, arguing about whether the hero was going to survive. Lazy Sunday mornings, where Grace made omelets, while Nathan and Sophie debated the optimal number of chocolate chips in a pancake. Grace started bringing books for Sophie, not just any books, but special editions, signed copies, rare finds that she somehow tracked down from obscure online sellers. Sophie received each one like a sacred treasure, immediately reading and rereading until the pages were soft with use. Nathan found himself memorizing Grace's preferences without trying. The coffee order she made, complicated on purpose because she liked watching baristas figure it out. The way she always ordered the second least expensive wine on the menu because the cheapest felt cheap, but spending more felt wasteful. The specific brand of dark chocolate she kept in her desk drawer for stressful days. In return, Grace learned his tells. The way his jaw clenched when he was stressed, the particular sigh that meant he was thinking about Caroline, the restless energy that preceded big work deadlines. She learned to navigate around his moods, and through them, never demanding he be anything other than exactly who he was. 4 months in, Nathan decided it was time for Grace to meet his parents. They flew in from Florida for a long weekend, and Nathan spent the days leading up to their arrival in a state of near constant anxiety. His parents had not met anyone he had dated since Caroline. They had witnessed the aftermath of his marriage's implosion, had held him while he cried over the phone, had offered to come stay and help countless times over the past 4 years. Introducing them to Grace felt significant in a way he could not fully articulate. "What if they do not like me?" Grace asked the night before, her usual composure cracking under the pressure. "What if they think I am not good enough for you?" Nathan pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "They are going to love you," he promised, "because I love you, and because you are wonderful, and because you make their granddaughter happy, which is basically all they care about anyway." The introduction went better than Nathan could have hoped. His mother opened the door and studied Grace for exactly 3 seconds before her face broke into a warm, genuine smile. "So you are the famous Grace," she said, pulling Grace into a hug that was probably too tight for a first meeting. "We have heard so much about you. Sophie will not stop talking about her favorite teacher, and Nathan just smiles like an idiot whenever your name comes up." "Mom." Nathan protested, but Grace was laughing, and the tension he had been carrying evaporated. His father shook Grace's hand with the solemn formality of a man raised to respect women and fear God, and then surprised everyone by saying, "Thank you for making our son smile again." We were worried about him for a while there. The weekend that followed was filled with family dinners and card games and long conversations about everything from politics to pancake recipes. Nathan watched Grace charm his parents with the same ease she had charmed him and Sophie, and he felt something shift and settle inside him. "This is it," he realized. "This is what I have been looking for." On their last night, his mother cornered him in the kitchen while Grace helped Sophie with a puzzle in the living room. "She is special," his mother said quietly, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I can see how happy she makes you. Both of you." Nathan nodded, not trusting his voice. "Do not let fear hold you back." His mother continued, reaching up to cup his face the way she had when he was a child. "You deserve this. You deserve to be loved and to love in return. Do not waste time being afraid. I will not," Nathan promised. "I will not." But even as their relationship deepened and their love grew stronger, Grace was carrying a secret that weighed on her more heavily with each passing day. Nathan noticed the signs without understanding them, the way Grace sometimes pulled back when he mentioned the future. The shadow that crossed her face when Sophie asked innocent questions about someday and forever. the moments when she seemed to disappear inside herself, present in body, but absent in spirit. He did not push. He had learned enough about patience in the past 4 years to know that some things could not be rushed, that trust had to be earned, that people shared their pain when they were ready and not before. But it worried him. In the quiet hours of the night, when Grace was asleep beside him and he was staring at the ceiling, Nathan found himself wondering if she was going to leave, if she would wake up one day and decide that he and Sophie were not enough, that she wanted something different, something better. The fear whispered in his ear with Caroline's voice, "You are not enough. You will never be enough." 5 months into their relationship, Sophie provided the catalyst for the conversation Nathan had been dreading. They were at dinner, the three of them, around Nathan's kitchen table, eating the pasta that had become their Thursday night tradition. Sophie was chattering about school, about her friends, about the upcoming science fair project she was planning. And then, with the casual brutality of a child who does not understand the weight of her words, she said, "Grace, when you and Dad get married, can I be the flower girl?" Nathan saw Grace's face go pale. Her fork froze mid-air. Her eyes went wide with something that looked terrifyingly like panic. "Sophie," Nathan said quickly, "that is getting a little ahead of things. Grace and I have not talked about. I am sorry." Grace interrupted, standing abruptly from the table. "I just need a minute. Excuse me." She practically fled from the kitchen, leaving Sophie and Nathan staring after her in bewildered silence. "Did I say something wrong?" Sophie asked, her voice small and worried. "I did not mean to make her upset." "No, sweetheart," Nathan assured her, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "You did not do anything wrong. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings about things, and it does not mean you caused them." But even as he said the words, his heart was pounding with fear. This was it. This was the moment Grace told him whatever she had been hiding, the secret that had been creating distance between them, even as everything else brought them closer. "I am going to go check on her," Nathan said. "Can you start clearing the table?" He found Grace in the hallway, her arms wrapped around herself, her head bowed. She was not crying, but she looked like she was holding herself together through sheer force of will. Grace. She looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw fear so profound it took his breath away. "There is something I need to tell you," she whispered. His heart dropped. Here it comes, he thought. The ending he had been dreading. But Grace just shook her head, her jaw tight with emotion. "Not tonight. But soon. I promise. I will explain everything soon." Nathan wanted to push, wanted to demand answers, wanted to know what could possibly be bad enough to make her look like this. But he had learned patience. He had learned to wait. "Whenever you are ready," he said instead. Grace pressed her forehead against his chest, and he felt her trembling against him. "I do not deserve you," she whispered. Nathan lifted her chin, making her meet his eyes. "That is not true. Whatever it is, we will face it together. I am not going anywhere." The conversation came a week later on a chilly Saturday evening when Sophie was at a friend's house for a sleepover. Grace had asked Nathan to meet her at Riverside Park, at the same bench where they had had their first accidental meeting. The significance was not lost on either of them. Nathan found her already there, sitting alone in the fading light, her hands twisted together in her lap. She looked small against the backdrop of autumn trees, vulnerable in a way he had never seen her. "Thank you for coming," she said when he sat down beside her. Of course, he wanted to take her hand, but something about her posture told him to wait. "Grace, whatever this is, you can tell me." She took a breath, and then the words started coming rushing out like water through a broken dam. She told him about Ryan, about the engagement, the diagnosis, the devastating end. She told him about the word complete, and how it still haunted her, about the dating app disaster, and the way she had sworn off relationships entirely. She told him about her fear that any man she loved would eventually leave when they discovered the truth about her, that she could not give them the one thing she had been taught all her life that men needed from women. "I should have told you sooner," she finished, her voice breaking. before you fell in love with me, before Sophie got attached. I was selfish. I wanted this so badly that I let myself pretend I could have it, even though I knew the truth would ruin everything. The truth, Nathan repeated carefully. That I cannot give you children. That I am not complete. The word hung in the air between them, ugly and weighted with all the pain Ryan had caused. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she had told him. Then he took both her hands in his, forcing her to meet his eyes. You think I fell in love with you because of your ability to have children. I think that is what men want. Grace whispered. A family. A legacy. Someone who can give them what I cannot. Nathan shook his head slowly, his heart breaking for this beautiful wounded woman who had convinced herself she was less than whole. Grace. I already have a daughter. I am not looking for someone to give me more children. I am looking for someone to share my life with, someone to laugh with and cry with and grow old with, someone who makes me feel alive again after years of just going through the motions. His grip tightened on her hands. You are not incomplete. You are exactly what Sophie and I need. What Ryan told you, what he made you believe about yourself, that was his failure, not yours. He could not see what was right in front of him, and that is his loss. But I see you, Grace. I see all of you, and I love all of you. Grace was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but she was also smiling. You do not understand, she said. Everyone says that at first. But then, I am not everyone. Nathan's voice was firm. I am not Ryan. I am not going to wake up one day and decide you are not worth loving. I have already made that decision. You are worth everything. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her while she sobbed against his chest. I was so scared, she whispered. I thought this would be the end. This is not the end, Nathan promised. This is the beginning. The real beginning now that we know everything about each other. He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair. I love you, Grace Mitchell, exactly as you are, and nothing you have told me tonight changes that. If anything, I love you more, because I know how brave you had to be to tell me. Grace pulled back, looking up at him with red-rimmed eyes that held something he had not seen before. Hope. Real hope. I love you too, she whispered, more than I knew was possible. They sat together on that bench as the stars came out, holding each other in the darkness. Two broken people who had somehow found their way to wholeness through love. In the days that followed their conversation in the park, something fundamental shifted in their relationship. The walls that Grace had built around her heart came down brick by careful brick. She started talking about the future, making plans that extended beyond the next weekend, allowing herself to imagine a life that included Nathan and Sophie for years to come. Nathan, for his part, felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he had not even realized he had been carrying. The fear that Grace would leave, that she was keeping something from him, that their happiness was built on an unstable foundation. All of it evaporated in the light of her honesty. They were stronger now, closer, more certain of each other. Sophie, with her uncanny ability to sense shifts in emotional weather, noticed immediately. You guys are different, she observed over breakfast one morning, her eyes moving between Nathan and Grace, with the sharp assessment of a scientist examining specimens. Good different. Like you are not scared anymore. Nathan and Grace exchanged a look that communicated volumes without words. We are not scared anymore. Nathan confirmed. We talked about some important things, and now we are on the same page. Sophie nodded, apparently satisfied with this explanation. Good, because I already started planning your wedding in my head, and it would be really inconvenient if you broke up now. Sophie Grace laughed, her cheeks flushing. What I am organized. It is a virtue. Life settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable, like something that could last. Grace spent most of her free time at Nathan's house, and the spare bedroom that had once been a storage space became hers, in all but name. Her books accumulated on shelves, her clothes filled a section of the closet, her presence infused every corner of the home. 6 months after their first date, Nathan realized that he could not remember what his life had felt like before Grace. The loneliness that had been his constant companion for 4 years seemed like a distant memory, something that had happened to a different version of himself. He had a family now, a real one, complete in all the ways that mattered. Just when you think the storm is over, life has a way of testing you. What happens next will shake everything Nathan and Grace have built. 7 months into Nathan and Grace's relationship on a Tuesday afternoon that had started like any other, the universe decided to remind them that happiness was never guaranteed. Nathan was waiting in the pickup line at Sophie's school, scrolling through work emails on his phone, when a knock on his car window made him jump. He looked up expecting to see one of the other parents, or maybe a teacher with a message about Sophie. Instead, he found himself staring at a ghost. Caroline stood beside his car, her long dark hair perfectly styled her designer clothes, speaking to a financial success that Nathan had not known she had achieved. She was thinner than he remembered her face, sharper, her eyes holding an expression he could not read. "Nathan," she said, when he finally rolled down the window, too stunned to do anything else. "You look good." The casual greeting, as if she had not destroyed their lives and disappeared without a trace 4 years ago, made something hot and angry rise in his chest. "What are you doing here? I want to see." Sophie Caroline said, her voice calm and reasonable in a way that made Nathan want to scream. "I have been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of growing. I want to be part of her life again." Nathan's hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. "You left," he said through gritted teeth. "You left us. You do not get to just show up and demand access to the daughter you abandoned." Caroline's expression flickered a crack appearing in her composed facade. "I know I made mistakes. I was young. I was overwhelmed. I was not ready. But I am different now. I have changed." The school doors opened, and children began streaming out. Nathan watched for Sophie, his heart pounding with a mixture of rage and fear. And then he saw her, his daughter walking toward the car with her backpack over her shoulder, her face bright with whatever story she was planning to tell him about her day. And he saw the moment she spotted Caroline. Sophie froze. Her face went pale, her eyes going wide with shock and confusion, and something that looked terrifyingly like hope. "Mom." The single word spoken in Sophie's uncertain voice shattered something in Nathan's chest. "Hi, baby," Caroline said, taking a step toward her. "I have missed you so much." Nathan was out of the car before he knew he had moved, positioning himself between his daughter and the woman who had hurt her so badly. "Not here," he said firmly. "Not like this. If you want to talk, we do it through lawyers." Caroline's expression hardened. "I have rights, Nathan. I have talked to an attorney. I am her mother." "You gave up that title when you walked out." Nathan replied, his voice cold. "Sophie, get in the car." Sophie was trembling, her eyes darting between her parents, clearly overwhelmed by the unexpected confrontation. She climbed into the car without protest, her face pale and drawn. Nathan turned back to Caroline, his voice low and dangerous. "Stay away from my daughter. If you want to see her, you file proper paperwork, but do not you ever ambush her at school again." He drove away without looking back, but his hands were shaking on the wheel, and his heart was racing with fear. In the passenger seat, Sophie sat in stunned silence for a long moment. Then finally, "Why now? Why does she want me now? I do not know, sweetheart." Nathan reached over to take her hand. "But I promise you, whatever happens, I am not going anywhere. We are going to figure this out together." When they got home, Sophie went straight to her room and closed the door, something she never did. Nathan stood in the hallway, feeling helpless and furious and terrified all at once. He pulled out his phone and called Grace. "I need you," he said, when she answered, his voice breaking. "Something happened. I need you." She arrived in 20 minutes, holding him while he explained everything, staying through the night, while Sophie finally emerged from her room and cried in their arms. They fell asleep on the couch, all three of them tangled together in a pile of grief and fear and love. And Nathan allowed himself to believe for just a moment that they would survive this, that their family was strong enough to weather any storm. The weeks that followed Caroline's reappearance were some of the hardest Nathan had ever experienced. Caroline, true to her threat, filed for partial custody. Her attorney was expensive and aggressive, painting Nathan as an unstable father who had deliberately kept Sophie from her mother, who had introduced inappropriate influences into the child's life. The inappropriate influence, Nathan realized with a sick feeling, was Grace. He hired his own lawyer, draining savings he had been building for Sophie's college fund. He gathered documents and witnesses and character references, building a case to prove what should have been obvious, that he had been present and devoted and loving while Caroline had vanished without a trace. The stress took its toll on everyone. Sophie became withdrawn, her grades dropping for the first time in her academic career. She stopped laughing at dinner, stopped chattering about school, stopped leaving notes for Grace to find. She moved through the days like a ghost of herself, clearly processing something too big for her 12-year-old mind to handle. Nathan barely slept, spending nights reviewing legal documents and strategizing with his attorney, then dragging himself through workdays where he could barely concentrate. His promotion review came and went, and he honestly could not remember what he had said or done during the meeting. Grace tried to help, but there was only so much she could do. She was there for dinners and bedtimes, offering stability and support, but she could not fight the legal battle for them. She could not protect Sophie from the pain of seeing her mother's name on official documents, of knowing that Caroline wanted her back now, after years of silence. One evening, Nathan came home to find Grace already there, a familiar and comforting presence, but his exhaustion was so profound that he could barely manage a greeting before collapsing onto the couch. "How bad is it?" Grace asked gently, sitting beside him. "Bad," Nathan admitted. "Her lawyer is good, really good. They are making me look like I poisoned Sophie against Caroline, like I have been deliberately keeping them apart. That is ridiculous. Anyone who knows you—" "A judge does not know me," Nathan interrupted. "A judge just sees papers and arguments. And Caroline's argument is compelling. Mother reuniting with child after absence, caused by father's alienation." Grace was quiet for a long moment. Then, "What can I do?" Nathan looked at her, at this woman who had come into his life so unexpectedly and made everything better, and felt his heart crack a little more. "You're doing it," he said. "You're here. That is everything." The next day, something unexpected happened. Nathan was called into Victoria Hayes' office expecting the worst, some kind of reprimand for his declining work performance over the past few weeks. Instead, he found Victoria studying him with an expression that was almost concerned. "Close the door," she said. "Sit." He did. Bracing himself. "I have noticed you have been struggling," Victoria said directly. "Your work has suffered. You are clearly not sleeping. I have heard rumors about a custody situation." Nathan's jaw tightened. "I apologize if my personal issues have affected—" "Stop." Victoria held up a hand. "I am not reprimanding you. I'm asking what is going on." Something in her tone made Nathan pause. It was not professional curiosity. It was something else, something more personal. So he told her about Caroline's return, the custody filing, the aggressive attorney, the fear that he might lose the daughter he had raised alone for 4 years. When he finished, Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that shocked him completely. "My ex-husband tried to take my children 20 years ago." Nathan stared at her. "I know what you are feeling." Victoria continued, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. "The fear, the helplessness, the anger. I went through it myself. I did not know you had children," Nathan admitted. 2 sons. They are grown now with families of their own. But there was a time when their father decided he wanted them not because he loved them, but because it would hurt me. He hired the best lawyers money could buy. He made my life hell for 2 years. What happened? I won. Victoria's expression hardened. Because I was the better parent. Because I had documented everything. And because I found the right attorney. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the desk to Nathan. "Margaret Chen. She is the best family lawyer in the state, possibly in the country. She represented me, and she will not lose your case." Nathan looked at the card, then back at Victoria. I cannot afford— She is a friend, Victoria interrupted. She owes me several favors. Call her tomorrow. Tell her I sent you. She will take care of the rest. Nathan was speechless. 8 years of working for this woman, and he had never seen anything behind her professional mask. Now suddenly she was offering him a lifeline. Why, he finally managed. Why are you doing this? Victoria met his eyes, and for the first time he saw the human being behind the Ice Queen facade. Because good fathers are rare, she said simply, and because some battles are worth winning. This is one of them. Margaret Chen was everything Victoria had promised and more. Within a week, she had dismantled Caroline's case with surgical precision, exposing the lies and exaggerations, presenting evidence of the abandonment that Caroline's attorney had tried to minimize. But the custody hearing still had to happen, and Sophie would have to speak to the judge, privately explaining in her own words what she wanted. The night before the hearing, Nathan sat on the edge of Sophie's bed while she pretended to sleep. I know you are awake, he said softly. Sophie's eyes opened, and he saw the fear there that she had been hiding for weeks. What if I say the wrong thing, she whispered. What if I mess it up? Nathan took her hand, his heart breaking for his daughter, who had already been through too much. You cannot mess it up, he promised. Just tell the truth. Tell the judge how you feel. That is all you have to do. What if— Sophie's voice trembled. What if Mom wins? What if I have to go live with her? Nathan pulled her into a hug, holding her tight against his chest. That is not going to happen, he said fiercely. I promise you, sweetheart, I am not going to let anyone take you away from me. The hearing was held in a small courtroom, with wood-paneled walls and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. Nathan sat beside Margaret Chen at one table, while Caroline and her attorney sat at another, the distance between them feeling both too close and impossibly far. Grace sat in the gallery behind Nathan, her presence a steady anchor in the storm. The judge was a stern-faced woman named Helen Barnes, who had clearly seen every variety of family drama over her career. She listened to both attorneys present their cases, reviewed documents, and asked pointed questions that made Caroline's lawyer squirm. And then it was time for Sophie to speak. Nathan watched his daughter walk to the judge's chambers, her back straight, and her chin up, looking braver than any 12-year-old should ever have to be. He wanted to follow her to protect her, but this was something she had to do alone. The minutes while Sophie was gone stretched into eternity. When she finally emerged, her eyes were red, but her expression was calm. She walked past Caroline without looking at her and slid into the seat beside Nathan, taking his hand and squeezing tight. The judge returned shortly after, her expression unreadable. I have heard from the child, Judge Barnes announced, and I have reviewed all the evidence presented by both parties. She looked directly at Caroline. Mrs. Cole, your attorney has painted a compelling picture of a mother seeking to reconnect with her daughter. But the evidence tells a different story. You abandoned your child and your husband without warning. You provided no support, financial or otherwise, for 4 years. You made no attempt to contact your daughter during that time. Caroline's face was pale, her composure cracking. Your daughter told me that you left when she was 8 years old. Judge Barnes continued. She told me that her father learned to braid her hair from internet videos, that he made every meal, attended every event, held her through every nightmare, that he never said a bad word about you, despite having every reason to. The judge's voice softened slightly. She also told me that she has a new family now, a father who loves her, and a woman who she hopes will someday be her stepmother. She asked me not to take that away from her. Nathan felt tears streaming down his face, but he did not care. The custody filing is dismissed, Judge Barnes announced. Mr. Cole will retain full custody. Mrs. Cole may petition for supervised visitation in the future if and when Sophie indicates she is ready for contact. She looked at Caroline one more time. I suggest you take some time to reflect on what you lost by leaving, and perhaps on whether you deserve to get it back. The gavel came down, and it was over. Nathan turned to Sophie and pulled her into his arms, holding her while they both cried. Over her shoulder, he saw Grace wiping her own tears, and then she was there too, wrapping her arms around both of them. "We did it," Sophie whispered against his chest. "We won. We did not win anything." Nathan replied, his voice thick with emotion. "We just kept what we already had, each other." In the weeks that followed, the custody hearing life slowly returned to normal. Sophie's grades improved. Her laughter returned. She started leaving notes for Grace again, silly observations, and inside jokes that filled the house with joy. Nathan felt the last of his fear dissolve, replaced by a certainty that he had not known was possible. Grace was not going to leave. They had been tested by fire, and they had emerged stronger. Victoria Hayes became an unlikely ally, checking in on Nathan's progress, offering advice about parenting and work-life balance that came from hard-won personal experience. Sophie, for reasons Nathan did not entirely understand, had taken a liking to her, inviting her to school events and declaring her an honorary grandmother. Victoria accepted these invitations with a gruffness that fooled no one, her eyes suspiciously bright when Sophie ran to hug her after performances. One evening, as Nathan and Grace sat on the porch watching the sunset, he realized that the life he had been building for the past 8 months was exactly the life he wanted. Not perfect, never perfect, but real. Full of love and laughter, and the inevitable complications that came with choosing to be vulnerable with other people. Grace leaned her head against his shoulder, and he pressed a kiss to her hair. "I love you," he said. "Have I told you that today?" "Only about 17 times, Grace replied, smiling. "But I do not mind hearing it again. I love you, and I am grateful every single day that I sent that stupid text to the wrong person." Grace laughed, that warm, genuine sound that had become his favorite thing in the world. "Best mistake you ever made." She agreed. In his pocket, Nathan's fingers brushed against the small velvet box he had been carrying for 2 weeks. The time was almost right. The text message glowed on Nathan's screen, mocking him with its familiarity. 1 year ago today, he had typed similar words to the wrong person and set in motion a chain of events that had changed everything. Now, standing in Riverside Park on a perfect autumn evening, he was about to take the next step in the journey that text had started. Sophie stood beside him, practically vibrating with excitement. "Is this the spot?" she whispered loudly. "Is this where you're going to do it?" Nathan nodded, his heart pounding. Grace was meeting them here in 10 minutes, supposedly for a casual walk to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of their first accidental meeting. She had no idea what was actually planned. "Dad," Sophie said, her voice suddenly serious. "I just want you to know that I am really happy about all of this, about Grace, about our family." Nathan looked at his daughter, at this incredible young woman who had weathered storms that would have broken most adults, and felt tears prick at his eyes. "I am happy too, sweetheart. Happier than I have been in a long time." Sophie grinned. "Good. Now try not to mess this up. Thanks for the confidence boost." Grace appeared on the path a few minutes later, her blonde hair catching the golden light of the setting sun. She was wearing a soft green dress that matched her eyes, and when she smiled at them, Nathan's breath caught the same way it had a year ago. "Hi," she said, reaching up to kiss his cheek. "What is all this about? You both look like you were hiding something." "Us," Sophie said with exaggerated innocence. "We would never." Grace laughed, but her expression was curious. "Nathan, I have something I want to say." Nathan began and was annoyed to find that his voice was shaking. He took both of Grace's hands in his, looking into her eyes. "1 year ago, I sent a text message to the wrong person. The most embarrassing moment of my entire life. I was sure it was going to ruin everything: my career, my reputation, my carefully constructed existence as a single dad who did not need anyone." Grace was smiling now, her eyes beginning to shine with understanding. "But that mistake led me to you," Nathan continued. "To this park, to this bench, to a life I never knew I was missing until you showed me what it could be." He released her hands and slowly lowered himself to one knee. Grace gasped, her hands flying to her mouth, You have loved me through my worst fears and my biggest challenges, Nathan said, pulling the velvet box from his pocket. You have loved Sophie like she was your own. You have made our house a home and our little family complete. He opened the box, revealing the ring that Sophie had helped him choose after 3 hours of shopping and approximately 400 questions. Grace Mitchell, will you marry me? Will you be my wife? Sophie's mother and my partner in whatever adventures come next. Grace was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but she was also laughing, nodding, reaching for him. Yes, she whispered. Yes. 1,000 times. Yes. Nathan slid the ring onto her finger and stood to pull her into a kiss that said everything words could not express. From somewhere nearby, Sophie let out a whoop of joy. Finally, she shouted, I have been keeping this secret for 3 weeks, and it was killing me. Grace laughed through her tears, opening her arms to include Sophie in their embrace. You knew, she asked. I helped pick the ring, Sophie said proudly, and I told Dad, if he did not ask you soon, I was going to do it myself. Nathan held his 2 favorite people in the world, feeling a peace settle over him that he had not known was possible. They were a family now, a real one, complete in all the ways that mattered. The wedding was held 6 months later in Riverside Park, at the exact spot where Nathan had proposed and where their story had truly begun. It was an intimate ceremony, just close friends and family gathered on folding chairs beneath a canopy of autumn leaves. Victoria Hayes sat in the second row, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief and pretending she was not emotional. Derek stood beside Nathan as his best man, grinning like he had personally arranged the entire romance. Sophie walked down the aisle first, scattering flower petals with the serious concentration of someone performing a sacred duty. She took her place beside Nathan and reached for his hand. You ready, Dad? Never been more ready for anything. And then Grace appeared at the end of the aisle and the rest of the world disappeared. She was wearing a simple white dress, her blonde hair crowned with delicate flowers, her smile so radiant that Nathan felt tears streaming down his face before she had taken a single step. She walked toward him, and with each step, he felt another piece of his old pain fall away. The abandonment, the loneliness, the fear that he was not enough, that he would never be enough. Grace reached him and took his hands, and he saw his own joy reflected in her eyes. The officiant spoke, but Nathan barely heard the words. He was too focused on Grace's face, on the life they were about to build together, on the miracle of being chosen by someone who saw all of him and loved him anyway. When it came time for vows, Nathan's voice was steady despite his tears. Grace, I thought my story was over. Single dad, abandoned husband, just going through the motions and trying to survive. Then I sent one stupid text to the wrong person, and it led me to you. You taught me that broken things can become beautiful. I promise to love you, to choose you, to show up for you every single day for the rest of our lives. Grace's vow was equally tearful, equally perfect. Nathan, I thought I was not enough, that I was incomplete, that no one would ever want me as I am. Then you looked at me like I was everything you had been searching for. You did not try to fix me. You just loved me. I promise to love you and Sophie with everything I have, to be your partner and your best friend from this moment forward. The officiant pronounced them married, and Nathan kissed his wife while their family cheered. But the moment that broke, everyone completely came after when Sophie asked to speak. The crowd fell silent as the 12-year-old stood before them, her expression serious, but her eyes bright with joy. Grace, she began, her voice steady. I wanted a mom for a long time, someone who would stay, someone who would love me and Dad, and make us a real family. She pulled a handmade card from her pocket, covered in glitter and drawings, and the earnest effort of a child who was trying to express something too big for words. Will you officially be my mom? Like not just married to Dad, but my actual mom. Grace fell to her knees, pulling Sophie into a fierce embrace, both of them crying. I already am, sweetheart, Grace whispered. I already am. There was not a dry eye in the garden. That night, long after the reception had ended and the guests had gone home, Nathan lay in bed beside his wife, still not quite believing that this was his life now. Grace was asleep, her breathing soft, and even her hand resting against his chest. Down the hall, Sophie was sleeping peacefully, a photo from the wedding clutched in her hand. Nathan thought about the text that had started everything. The panic, the embarrassment, the certainty that he had ruined his life with a single, stupid mistake. He smiled in the darkness. Some mistakes, he reflected, lead you exactly where you are meant to be. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We would love to have you join our family of viewers who believe in second chances and the power of love. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that sometimes our biggest mistakes lead us to our greatest blessings. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.